Welcome all. My name is Dr. Pete. I'm a PhD biochemist, nutrition network coach practitioner, and a primal health coach. And I've been away on vacation for a while, and now I'm back. And so we will get back to weekly presentations. Today's presentation on gout is in regard to uric acid lowering and metabolic supplements 2022. Now, the motivation for this presentation came from questions that I have addressed on my YouTube channel, Dr. Pete's Keto Club. And recently there was a comment asking me again to talk about allopurinol and also quercetin and Tart Cherry supplements to have uric acid lowering effects in the case of gout. So I decided, rather than just talking about literally that topic over again, that I would also combine information about other supplements that I'm taking. And the essentially the parameters that I think that you should evaluate before taking supplements on, and then what to do in terms of biomarker monitoring after you take on supplements. Remember, I am not a medical doctor, and this is not medical advice. This is not medical advice. My decision to undergo treatment with allopurinol, I consider to be a personal decision. And it is something that I talked with my doctor before I did it. So as with everything that's concerning gout and other metabolic diseases that are usually associated with gout, like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, and so on, you need not only to have an intimate relationship with the knowledge concerning the driver of those diseases, but also you need to talk with your doctor and then decide what the best course of action is for you going forward. Let me just reply in my chat here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just review my gout hypothesis, and we're not going to go on long about this. Remember that gout, one thing that's really clear from the literature is that gout is driven by fructose metabolism, which involves, that pathway does in fact involve alcohol and hyperglycemia, because of the fact that the alcohol and the hyperglycemia can enter into fructose metabolism by the fact that the alcohol and the hyperglycemia utilize the polyol pathway in order to do that. And I've produced a lot of videos on that particular metabolism, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole with that in today's talk. I want to get to the urate lowering drugs and also supplements. But let's talk about what, in my view, is the bottom line for the gout hypothesis. So you basically need three things. You need the biologically important cell of the joint, whatever joint we're talking about, because usually gout is asymmetric. So it happens in a toe joint, or it happens in a knee, or it happens in a finger joint, but usually it's not symmetrical. Like with osteoarthritis, usually an individual will have inflammation and pain, for example, in matching joints. Like they'll have it in their hands, or they'll have it in both knees, or they'll have it in the toe joints of both feet. But with gout, usually the ailment occurs, the inflammation and the pain occurs in a singular joint on one foot or the other, or one hand and the other, or one knee and the other. And generally the pain is decimating. If you ask a gout sufferer to evaluate their pain, they will give you, and you give them a parameter between 1 and 10. they're going to tell you it's a 10. And I've suffered gout, so I can back that up. It's amazingly painful. So what do we need for a gout attack? We need inflammation of the chondrocyte. This is the biological cell that's important in our joints for maintaining the integrity of the joint. And that involves the production of specialized proteins, fats, all kinds of biological important molecules that are necessary for the joint to have the right lubrication for the inflammation level to stay low, and so on, things like that. We know that alcohol can have a deleterious effect on joints. We know that hyperglycemia, in terms of hyperglycemia, that the polyol pathway is active in chondrocytes. That comes from the osteoarthritic literature. We know that the innate immune system is involved in this, and this is because the chondrocyte, in my view, is undergoing a low level of constant inflammation, which you can think of as priming the chondrocyte for sickness. And when the level of uric acid spikes as a result of the fructose metabolism, and therefore the intracellular uric acid is elevated, the chondrocyte can become sick. It can introduce uric acid into the synovial fluid that is bathing the chondrocyte, along with inflammatory markers like IL-1 beta. And the literature has shown that there are other effector molecules that are required in combination with monosodium urate. One study, for example, showed the combination of free fatty acids, C16, along with, or C16 to C18, and that combination with monosodium urate was enough to institute or to initiate the inflammatory gout event. We need the innate immune system, the combination of macrophages, neutrophils, and monocytes, who are also capable of producing JNK1 and also IL-1 beta. When all these things come together, that is when we get the gout flare. We know that the inflammasome NLRP3 is involved in this process. And we also, there's evidence that other types of inflammasomes that are related to NLRP3, but the composition is different, there is also evidence for that. So what's the point? The point is, if we want to put gout in remission, we need to eliminate the main instigators of this condition, which are sugar, mainly the fructose. We need to eliminate hyperglycemic events. So that would be eating food that will produce high levels of blood glucose. And we need to eliminate alcohol. And when we do this and move to a whole real food lifestyle, also monitoring our biomarkers, we may also down the road see the need to cut into the carbs in order to bring the inflammation down even lower. Some people go onto a ketogenic diet. That is my case, and my gout is in remission. Although I have had some episodes that I will talk about as we move to the issue of allopurinol and supplementation. So if you are considering, after moving to a whole food environment, real food environment, cooking the food yourself with the elimination of sugar, high fructose containing meals, packaged food, and so on, along with the reduction in foods that cause hyperglycemia, along with the elimination of alcohol. So you've done that. One of the important factors is to stabilize your metabolics. And what do I mean by that? Well, you've stopped the three main instigators. You've established metabolic stability. So you've gone 2 to 3 months, let's say minimum. If you've chosen to go all the way ketogenic, what you're looking for there is keto adaptation. And in the process of the keto adaptation, you want to monitor biomarkers. In particular, you want to monitor your uric acid. And the reason that you want to do this is because when you go onto the ketogenic diet, your uric acid, your circulatory uric acid will rise. And the reason that's going to happen is because you are fat burning. And when you fat burn, because of the reduction in the carbs and also bringing the insulin expression down, the fat burning, you will start producing ketones. And these are a class of molecules that are organic acids. And some of them are going to be excreted in the urine. And they compete for excretion with the uric acid. So in the process of keto adaptation, you see your uric acid rise. And it can rise to relatively high levels, like between 9 and 11 mg per deciliter was not unusual for me. In that time period of keto adaptation, I did not suffer gout flares. However, there is a risk of a gout flare at that point because of the dynamic rise in uric acid. And I've done a lot of videos on this. I think that gout flares, that you're most at risk for a gout flare, not if you're consistently high or consistently low, but you're most at risk for a gout flare when there are dynamic shifts going on in your body, where uric acid is either rising or it's coming down. And I've talked about this in previous videos, and I don't know in this talk because I'm doing it live. Maybe I'll come back to that issue. But after keto adaptation, and this is crucial, what happens is you see your uric acid levels come down. Now, I believe, and this is anecdotal, right, with my experience coaching, that people tend to break into two categories. When that uric acid comes down, for some of us, it settles at a level of what's considered hyperuricemia. So the uric acid remains high between 7 and 8 mg per deciliter. And then we have this other category of people where the uric acid seems to fall into the normal range. And normal range is going to be between 4 and 7 mg per deciliter. That's pretty much considered the normal range. The thing to remember is that people do suffer from gout with uric acid levels well within the normal range. There's plenty of evidence for that. And again, this comes back to the idea that you want to have a lifestyle where the uric acid is as low as possible, but it is stable. And you're not in a situation from one day to the next where you have these significant rises or significant declines. This is where it seems people get into trouble. So it's about getting your metabolism stabilized. You're eating in a healthy manner, the whole real food that you're cutting up and eating yourself. Perhaps you've made the decision to go ketogenic, but you're eating this way every day so that after keto adaptation, the uric acid has stabilized. Now, at the point of stabilization, when you are certain of this, and some people keto adapt slower than others, like in my case, I'm in my 60s, and my keto adaptation was at least a year based on monitoring a lot of different biomarkers, which I'm not going to get into here. And again, this is stuff that I've covered in other presentations, looking at all kinds of different things, the lipids, inflammatory markers, my uric acid levels, blood glucose, blood ketones, and so on. You can, if you're doing a good job monitoring biomarkers, you can see keto adaptation. For some people, it's longer than 2 or 3 months. So I'm giving you the average right now. Again, I believe monitoring blood biomarkers is important. Some people think this is going overboard, but metabolic issues are complex. And I think anyone listening to this understands that there's a lot of controversy in the medical establishment about what approach is best to take care of these different issues, whether it's diabetes or gout or whatever it is. So I believe in measuring the biomarkers because you can see what's happening with you directly, more or less. And I see that we do have a listener here, Andy Taylor, who is a professional in the area of the Kraft test, which I believe is one of the most advanced and most important biomarker analyses that a person can elect to do. And the main reason why is because you can see what your insulin expression is relative to a glucose load. And that's something, this Kraft test, which generally doctors never do. So in any case, all I want to say is that measuring biomarkers, in my view, is important because it gives you super good information about actually what is going on with you. Like being able to tell when you get into keto adaptation and be able to know when your uric acid has come down and to have a really good sense about whether your uric acid is stable or not. And then the other thing is the measuring uric acid allows you to troubleshoot different foods. You can see when you have a particular meal like of red meat, and there are different types of red meat, for example, a steak versus hamburger, and being able to see what the effect of post-meal uric acid is, right? And you're able to also look at what the effect exercise has on your uric acid and all kinds of different things that you can ask questions about. And what measuring the biomarkers allows you to do is to actually paint a pretty good picture of what the situation is with you, which allows clarity when you're looking out into this forest, especially these days with information coming in from all directions at you about, oh, well, if you're suffering from this, just do this. Well, I think it's worth knowing what your metabolic situation actually is, and then looking carefully at what your interventions are going to be. And going to a whole food lifestyle, in particular, going ketogenic, puts gout in remission for a lot of people. But there are some people that still suffer from gout. And this is another reason why I think it's necessary to measure biomarkers, so you understand it as best you can what's going on with you. And number 4, I think it's really important to be stabilized in a new lifestyle. This isn't just about eating. This is about managing your sleep, your mindfulness, your social interactions, right? Because when you go after gout remission and you change the way you eat, you're going to meet lots of people, maybe even a spouse. You've got close friends who may not agree with your lifestyle change. And you need to consider that going into this, because getting gout remission requires, I think, making substantial lifestyle change. So how are you going to modulate that in your relationships? You're going to have to take a critical look at sleep and stress. The concept of mindfulness, because stress and sleep contribute to uric acid in your circulatory system. And then lastly, the component of exercise. And different types of exercise have different effects on uric acid. And don't think that I'm even arguing that you should limit exercise. I don't believe that, even for 1 nanosecond. And you're talking to a guy who's put his gout in remission. And I am active every single day. I do high intensity training. I do strength training. I go to the climbing gym. I do long hikes. I go backpacking with heavy packs. I don't limit any of that stuff because I understand that a healthy metabolism absolutely requires figuring out the exercise component. But I think that you've got to understand that gout that's a global illness that's coming from the dysfunction of metabolism, predominantly the overactivation of fructose metabolism, and getting that under control is really important. So before I move to the next slide, what's the point? Point is, before you even start worrying about supplements and uric acid lowering drugs, you need to get stabilized. with your metabolism, see what the situation is, and then move on. Remember, that is not medical advice. This is what I did. Now, because when you go ketogenic and the uric acid will rise because of the fact that you also are producing ketones, as I explained, you may want to have a conversation with your doctor in advance and make sure to have anti-inflammatories on hand. Why? Because fundamentally, in the gout hypothesis, I believe that your chances of a gout flare are highest when uric acid is undergoing flux, when it is either rapidly increasing or rapidly decreasing. So have the anti-inflammatories on hand when you start this process. Most people describe to me, there are some that complain and they say, when I started this, I got gout flares. That's mostly probably due to the fact that they had rapid rises in uric acid, right? Again, this is a matter of getting stable. And other people like myself who did not have gout flares when they went ketogenic with the uric acid rise. And sometimes my uric acid was running up around 9 and 10, even sometimes at 11 mgs per deciliter. So the question then becomes, we get stabilized, right? We see that, and this was the case for me. I'm in the category of people where my uric acid remained elevated. So the question then becomes, do I take a urate lowering drug or not? And the question of allopurinol actually is a big deal because there are a lot of cases, including me, that when you go on a powerful urate lowering drug like this one, because of that dynamic, right, where you have this substantial dynamic, and this will happen, decrease in uric acid, you are vulnerable to a gout flare. And I had a gout flare when I went on allopurinol for exactly what I believe is this specific reason. So if you're going to do allopurinol, I think it is imperative, and this is the thing to think about if you're going to make that decision, talking with your doctor, that you realize that if you go on it, you need to stay on it. Because what you want to do is get the uric acid down into the middle of the normal range between 4, underneath 7 mgs per deciliter. So let's say 4 to 6. And I have chosen to listen substantially to Dr. Richard Johnson and Dr. Perlmutter with what they have to say about this. And I have chosen to get my uric acid centered at 4 mgs per deciliter. Sometimes I'm under that, and sometimes I'm a little bit over that. But my average uric acid now, based on allopurinol, and then I'll come to the other supplements in a minute, is at 4 mgs per deciliter. Now, again, you need to talk to your doctor. And I think I made a mistake when I first started this, and I upped the dose of allopurinol quickly. And I saw the decrease in my uric acid, but I also suffered from gout flare. And then I got nervous about having to be on allopurinol the rest of my life, and I went off of it. And guess what happened when I did that? I got a gout flare. Now, about 3-4 months passed, and I did a lot more thinking and digging in the literature about this. And I came to the conclusion, because of the relationship with Alzheimer's disease in the future and such, that's really a topic for another discussion, but there's fructose metabolism in the brain. And if you listen again to Johnson and Perlmutter, they are insistent about getting the uric acid down. And I thought again about having it at between 4, or to have my average centered at 4, sometimes under 3 to 3.5, sometimes over, right? We're talking about an average, sometimes over about 5. So I'm centered at 4. That's where I am these days. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go back on allopurinol, but I'm going to do what I call a titration. So where I've settled, and a titration is an incremental addition. Like I didn't just start taking 600 mgs a day or something like that. So what I'm doing now, and I took my time doing this over several weeks. In fact, it's turned into months. I take 100 milligrams of uric acid, I take 100 milligrams of allopurinol along with quercetin right before my breakfast meal. And then I take 100 mgs of allopurinol along with quercetin right before my dinner meal. And then if I have a mid-afternoon meal, and this depends on whether I'm working out or not, right? Whether I worked out really hard that day in the morning. So if I have appetite for something beyond a snack in the mid-afternoon between the two main meals that I eat, then I will have Tart Cherry before I have that meal. And in this way, I've been able to manage my uric acid and hold an average at 4 mgs per deciliter. Now, here's what my typical day looks like. So again, before I have that morning meal, right, which is usually around 10 a.m., like after I finish this broadcast today is when I'll make my breakfast. And before I eat it, I'm going to have 100 milligrams of my allopurinol along with 500 milligrams of quercetin. Keep in mind, for the supplements, I tested these. First, I stabilized at 100 mgs of allopurinol before each of my 2 meals, and that was it. Then for a time, I tested having Tart Cherry with the allopurinol. Then I tested having quercetin with the allopurinol, and the combination of quercetin and the allopurinol has got my best results by measuring biomarkers. So now before my morning meal and before the evening meal, I have 100 mgs of my allopurinol and 500 mgs of quercetin. If most of the time in the mid-afternoon, whether I have a snack or whether I actually have more food like a salad with some protein on it, I will have 500 mgs of Tart Cherry. Then before my dinner, I will have 100 mgs of allopurinol again, along with the 500 mgs of quercetin. Sometimes if I get up in the morning and for whatever reason, my fasting uric acid is higher than I like, usually if it's 5 mgs per deciliter or slightly higher than that, rarely now am I having values that are up near 6. But if I'm at about 5, then I'll take a Tart Cherry on a fasted stomach before, this is leading up to my breakfast. So I'm showing you right now, this is what I do every day, and it's worked out really well for me. I maintain average uric acid, daily average at 4 mgs per deciliter. Now, I've had complaints before, people that are that will comment and say, this is really an advertisement for these supplements. And here's what the thing you guys got to remember. All right. I'm not advertising this. I mean, one of the problems is that when you go and you start taking supplements, none of those supplements are regulated by the FDA. You don't know what you're getting, right? And the other thing is, if you look at my track record, it's been a couple of years before I was even willing to talk about supplements. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is because I was trying different ones and looking to make sure that they didn't disrupt my glucose or my ketones, and to see if there was an effect or not, right? Because what's the point of taking a supplement and spending the money on that stuff if it isn't working? So this is the quercetin I take, and it works for me. All right. And I'm also providing you a reference so you can see for yourself, even if you don't follow Johnson or Perlmutter, you can see for yourself there's literature that says quercetin works. In addition to the fact that it also has other antioxidants with it. So this is the one I use. It's the one I recommend. There's a link in my show notes for it. I do get a kickback if you buy it that way. But you guys got to recognize I'm doing all this. I'm working for free, and I'm busting my patookie to do it. Right? This is what I spend all my time on, to try and provide you guys with, valid stuff that I know works. This works for me. You may choose a different one, and you may get this one, and maybe it doesn't work. Again, check the biomarkers. We're all individuals. We have different biochemistry and genetics. So this is the one that works for me. You can check it out and see if it works for you. At least I know it works for me. That's what I can tell you. This is the Tart Cherry that I take. And again, it's the same rules. I take this and I know it has a urate lowering effect. There are also in this, there's other ingredients that contribute to antioxidant effect. And here's a reference that you can see for yourself that there are urate lowering effects with Tart Cherry. And again, this one works for me. When you get supplements, test them yourself, monitor biomarkers, and see if they work for you. Now, I also, since I'm doing this, I thought I should also talk about other metabolic supplements that I take. And again, I have a really high bar. I'm not going to do anything. The bottom line is when you go out on the internet and you look at supplementation, everybody is making claims about this business. So the first rule I've set for myself is that I'm not taking a supplement unless I can show in the literature, I can find in the literature that a particular supplement actually does what they think it does. And then when you buy the supplement, you actually need to evaluate for yourself whether you're getting an effect or not. Now, I've gone with CoQ10, which is a very important supplement for mitochondrial function. Why am I concerned about the mitochondria? Because we know that fructose metabolism disrupts mitochondrial function. So, and over chronic use of the fructose pathway, the standard American diet, 5 or 6 times a day, high levels of sugar, hyperglycemia, alcohol, the 3 big ones, the deadly triad, that this can lead to mitochondrial damage. So indirectly, this is related to uric acid, because uric acid is involved in the signaling that disrupts mitochondrial function. So as I have stabilized my metabolism, I also want to improve my mitochondrial function and biogenesis. So one of the strategies I have is I looked in the literature, and taking CoQ10 supplement can help mitochondrial function. There's no convenient biomarker way to measure this. All right. So what I did was I started it, and my rule of thumb is you have to go a few months with it, because you can't, there's this pill mentality in American culture. If I take this, I want to feel better tomorrow. That's not going to happen. But taking this supplement, and I'm taking, I think, 1,000 mg per day total. I take it in the morning and then in the evening after my evening meal. I've noticed my recovery rate from exercise has significantly improved. Basically, I can go to the climbing gym and spend several hours there. I can do a weight training exercise, or I can do HIIT. And the next day, I don't feel like I've wrestled a water buffalo, and that there's just no way I can be inactive or be active, right? So I've noticed an improvement with this. It's worth it to me, and I continue to take it today. L-carnitine. This is necessary for the transport of fatty acids into the mitochondria. So both the CoQ10 and the L-carnitine improve the oxidation of fats, which allows us to be more efficient at producing ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell, right? It's the molecular money we use to do things, activity, eating, sleeping, thinking, all that business, right? And I'm wanting to improve that. So I take this, And I have, between this and the CoQ10, I have basically been able to cut my recovery time in terms of exercise in half. And we're really after two things here. With the CoQ10 and the L-carnitine, we're after the improvement of mitochondrial function and enhancing biogenesis, which we get by having, I should say, normalized amounts of these things in the diet. And then it goes without saying, I mean, there's plenty of literature out there that vitamin D deficiencies is related to all kinds of health issues, right? And it maybe is super prominent right now in the COVID reporting. So I take 10,000 units of vitamin D every day, and then I also take MK7, which is K2, basically, because I want my calcium deposition to be going in the right directions. I want it deposited in the right locations, in the various locations that matter for that. I take omega-3 fish oils, and this is another supplement that I've noticed made a difference in me when I started 4 years ago into the ketogenic lifestyle. Now, you're not going to hear this big, massive argument from me about omega-6s versus omega-3s, except to say that the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s in our membranes, this also has to do with mitochondria, is really high in the standard American diet. So I take omega-3s because I want to see that ratio shifted to a more normalized evolutionary ratio. Muscle cramping. When I went on to the ketogenic diet, I had issues with muscle cramps at night. And I tried to, I elevated my sodium, which made a contribution in the early days. It's less of a factor now because I've been ketogenic now, on the ketogenic lifestyle now for 4 years, gout in remission. But I have found that I need to keep my magnesium up. Now, when you ask about magnesium supplementation, you're going to get the phone book. And the reason you are is because this can be problematic for causing diarrhea. And all I'm going to say about this is that you got to try different preparations of this stuff and find what works for you. And what I have found is that this one works for me. I also get calcium and zinc this way. And as long as I consistently use this every single day, and I break up my pills into small amounts, and I figured out how much I need to use each day in order to feel the best and also not have the nightly muscle cramps. And then lastly, there is vitamin B12. And this, I don't have any real anecdotal data for, but the reason that I'm taking it is because I have seen some biomarker data going into the lab and having blood draws where other people, clients of mine, have actually seen that they're low in this area. And I started thinking, well, maybe I should supplement. So I went ahead, and this is the one that I do. I can't make any major claims about this, but I thought, all right, if you're going to talk about this, then you should tell people exactly what you're doing and not hold anything back. So I'm taking this preparation. I take it once a day in the morning. You just put the little tablet under your tongue and it dissolves. And so that's what I'm doing. All right. So the main purpose of this talk was directed at gout and the urate lowering drugs that I take along with supplements. So just to reiterate that, if you're thinking about, you've done due diligence, you've gotten your metabolism stabilized, and now you're looking at urate lowering, and your uric acid is still running hyperuricemic based on the definition of the medical establishment. So you're up there around 7 mg per deciliter to 8 mg per deciliter, and you're thinking, you know what? I'm getting older. I just think, based on and there's lots of arguments out there, but if you listen to Dr. Richard Johnson and Perlmutter and you're like, yeah, I think the wisdom coming from those guys is that my uric acid needs to be lower, period. You decide on that. Then starting allopurinol is a good way to go, watching for the side effects. Titrate it. That means bring it in incrementally. Start with very low dose. Take your time. Measure uric acid over weeks and see where you end up. My goal was to have the allopurinol as low as possible. Then combined with quercetin and or the Tart Cherry, you could do what I did and you play around with that. Get that uric acid down, and I'm advocating 4 mg per deciliter. Perlmutter, Johnson are probably going to come in. They're a little more conservative, around 5. But as Johnson has pointed out to me in specific interviews, which was loaded to my YouTube channel, there are never been any incidents of anyone with deleterious effects having uric acid under 4 mg per deciliter. And remember that in the 1920s, the average uric acid in a male was between 2 and 3 mg per deciliter. All right, so with that, I'm going to close. Let me just check the questions really quickly. Okay, so one of the comments here, I'm just going to show it. This was somebody who went on keto for 4 months and then they got hit with a flare. All right, this is not uncommon. And again, keto adaptation, there's no hard line for this, right? When you look at the literature, the average is 2 to 3 months, but one has to ask a lot of questions about that because age makes a difference. And if you're like me and you're in your 60s when all this happened, keto adaptation in my case took a year. All right. And there is a certain proportion of people in that transition that are going to have gout flares. No doubt about it. I'm not claiming any silver bullets here or that keto is the answer. What I'm saying, though, is that if you choose to do this for remission, just in case that wasn't clear, I think it should be done in phases. Phase number 1, cut the sugar, get the fructose out of your life, stop the hyperglycemia, and don't drink alcohol. Stay that way for a while. Measure biomarkers, see what happens, right? Then, if you think that you need to cut into the carbs, I think going ketogenic is a good way to go. Remember, the effects of elevated beta hydroxybutyrate is good because beta hydroxybutyrate inhibits the inflammasomes that are required for a gout flare. That's a good thing. It's the shift in uric acid that happens during the adaptation phase that I believe is problematic. And so this lifestyle might not work for you. You know, that is fair and it is a possibility. But I would try to do things in phases. Have anti-inflammatory drugs available to deal with a potential gout flare and give this time. If you're in your 60s like me, I actually think it's really unrealistic that you're going to keto adapt within a few months. And usually the people that are trying to do that, there's usually hidden problems, all kinds of things where carbs are sneaking in from dietary habits that we've all encountered and lived with our whole lives. So that's what I would say about that. Okay, so yes, eating cherries, but my understanding is that you got to watch out which cherries you eat because for number one, you want the ones that are more tart because tartness has less fructose in it. And the question you're asking about the ketones is really a good one. That's why I go with the supplement and supplement choice matters here because the supplement, you're getting the good things out of the cherries without the addition of the sugar, right? And like I was just saying a second ago, sugar can sneak its way into our lifestyle really carefully. So I would say that you should persist and go on, right? But maybe try quercetin because I think so far with the supplements I've tried that it has a more dramatic effect on uric acid than the Tart Cherry supplements. Okay, so that's the end of the questions. Thank you very much for watching. And this video will appear on my YouTube channel where you'll find a lot more information on gout and also on sugar addiction and other aspects of the ketogenic diet, like the relationship between the fructose pathway and insulin resistance as an example. All right, so I'd like to thank you guys again for watching. Have a really, really great day. I appreciate you being here. Please subscribe if you get a chance to our YouTube channel, and I will see you next week.